Namaste.
In the mythos of mathematics, the inspirational story of Srinivas Ramanujan is unparalleled. His letter to G.H. Hardy, barely a few months before his death, had hinted at the mysterious Mach theta functions. Now, over 90 years later, the last prophecy of Ramanujan is slowly revealing its tantalizing secrets, uncovering fertile realms at the very edge of the mathematical world. Q-series, harmonic mass forms, quantum modular forms, automorphic forms, and many more, leading to new and spectacular breakthroughs in the field of number theory in mathematics. The genius of Ramanujan preoccupies generations of mathematicians even to this day.
Beautiful, beautiful functions. So unlike Rogers. Mach theta functions. That's what I will call them.
"25 years ago, I made this film, probably the first dramatized documentary produced in India, to mark the centennial celebration of the great mathematician. The enigma of Srinivas Ramanujan has endured the passage of time. Ramanujan continues to be an enigma even today. To unravel the mysteries of his mathematics is an infinite task. Yet, we are not trying to do the impossible.
We are trying to present some facets of his life and work with a fond hope that it might excite the curiosity of some young student who would then go on to understand the depth and beauty of Ramanujan's mathematics.
It's in this small town of Erode that Srinivas Ramanujan was born.
Ramanujan? Did you say Ramanujan?
Yeah, if you look at the horoscope which was prepared when he was born, it is written as Ramanujam. But the English anglicized it to Ramanujan. The world knows him as Ramanujan, but we know him as Ramanujan.
That's right. Although he was born here in Erode, but Kumbakonam played a much bigger role in his life.
Come, let's go.
This is the house where Komalattammal, the mother of Ramanujan, was. This is the parental home of Ramanujan, and this is where he was born. This house is named as Jyoti Nilayam, and that seems to be only in the year 1951.
So was the original house broken down and rebuilt in 1951?
No, actually somebody else bought it and rebuilt it, reconstructed it.
That's kind of sad.
The original must have been like the house at the far end of the street.
Look at this. What is this? Like 200 years old?
Yeah, the last remnants of a bygone era.
Really? Hey, look at this. The house is sunk way below the road after many years of probably many resurfacings of the road.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Look at those tiles.
தாயே அமகிரி தவமா தவமிருந்து செத்த குழந்தடி நீதாண்டி காப்பாத்தணும்.
ஸ்ரீ ராமானுஜர் அவதார தினமான வியாழக்கிழமை என்று பிறந்திருக்கான் குழந்தை. அதனால் ராமானுஜன்னு பெயர் வச்சுருங்கோ.
If we go back to the last letter of Ramanujan, is very clear now, and in fact, it's a shame he died too early. He starts this. I have discovered Mach theta functions. Unlike the false theta functions studied by Rogers, and we'll talk more about the Rogers-Ramanujan identities and how they relate to this, but the letter says, unlike the false theta functions studied by Rogers, they enter into mathematics as beautifully as the ordinary theta functions. So Ramanujan seems to be disappointed in the false theta functions. They're somehow unnatural. I first heard the story of Srinivasa Ramanujan when I was a teenager living in Baltimore, Maryland in the 80s. A letter came from India addressed to my father. It was a letter from Janaki Amal, Ramanujan's widow. And she was thanking my father a gift he'd made. It was a contribution to the making of a bust of Ramanujan. I didn't know who Ramanujan was, so I had to ask, who was Ramanujan?
Again, we are on our way to Kumbakonam.
It's a journey of discovery.
In the spirit of pilgrimage, visiting places associated with Ramanujan.
You know, Ken, Ramanujan had a good sense of humor. When Tanjavur was suggested to him, he was sick. He said, Tanjavur? I don't want to go there. It reminds me of Tanjavur. He was punning on the word Tanjavur. A place where I died is what it means. I don't want to be there.
Then he can say that, the last letter that he wrote to Hardy and get on what you were saying.
This documentary is an attempt to imagine the cultural and mental landscape of Ramanujan, to bring to light his intangible presence. The depth of his creativity can only be allured to make evident his place in the history of mathematical thought.
This is the Krinan bungalow where Ramanujan stayed for a couple of months before he shifted to Gometra, where he unfortunately died. Prolonged illness.
Gometra is where he studied the Mach theta functions, right?
Yeah, why Mach?
Why Mach? Yeah, that's the question.
Well, the Mach theta functions, I've spent years thinking about these functions, and what you just asked is the main question. So for many of us working in number theory, the mathematics in Ramanujan's last letter, the very last letter he wrote to Hardy, has been a mystery to us. This letter was written in 1920, and until very recently, the question you just asked, why Mach, is exactly the question we would ask, except we didn't know what the Mach theta functions were. And it turns out a few years ago, there was a great thesis by a Dutch mathematician named by the name of Sander Zwegers, who finally figured out what these Mach theta functions are. It's a very technical object, but it turns out that with this understanding, we've been able to prove lots of wonderful things in math. Math physics, and probability theory. It's been incredible.
Is this business of Mach theta functions and the rest of it useful today in current day mathematics?
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to think of Ramanujan's last prophecy as a treasure trove of math. People are even using them to study black holes.
Black holes?
Black holes.
Wow.
And you see, this discovery that the Mach theta functions, the discovery that Zwegers made, is quite a historic event for mathematics. There have now been many applications in mathematical physics, combinatorics, and number theory. It's really an incredible sequence of events. I'd like to think of it as this. Our understanding, which is only the result of the last 10 years of work, is the realization of perhaps Ramanujan's last prophecy.
That's amazing.
It really is amazing.
So could Ramanujan have foreseen the mathematics that's come out of Mach theta functions today?
Oh, I don't think so. Most of the applications that I've discussed involve objects that weren't even defined until long after his death. This is all brand new stuff. But there's a related question. Many of us who work in number theory, we feel like we've been playing catch-up. Every few years we figure out a little bit more about the mystery of Ramanujan. We've learned about Dyson's rank function, and then we learned about the crank function, and now we're beginning to learn about the Mach theta functions in some real, concrete, rigorous sense. And what we've now learned, and it's 2012, this letter was written in 1920, we've learned that all of these objects are interrelated in ways that we're only beginning to understand now, despite the fact we've been working on these objects for decades. So I'd like to think of the Mach theta functions, the crank function, the rank function as beautiful instruments, musical instruments that Ramanujan gave us hints of. And now we see that they all fit together beautifully in one harmonious orchestra.
That's beautiful.
That's the result of this prophecy.
Kumbakonam was called as the Cambridge of the East. You know, you had a college, you had a high school, you had excellent teachers like Seshu Iyer, who was very famous. So you got an opportunity for a good higher education in Kumbakonam. I mean, of course, other than Madras. We have reached Ramanujam's house.
You know, this is where he must have sat down and worked through car synopsis and Loni's trigonometry.
Yes, and just imagine, this is where he worked on his big slate before he recorded his findings in those famous notebooks.
Right, he used to write on the slate and then flip over, write again, erase and then write.
That was here.
That was here.
And what we call as the first notebook got written here. I mean, a large part of it is written here, including that things on magic squares and things of that kind.
And you know, because of him, car synopsis and even more so maybe Loni's trigonometry is so famous. Even when I was a college student, we used to study Loni's trigonometry 70 or 80 years after Ramanujan.
Yeah, perhaps without him, nobody would even remember cars.
Yeah.
Car synopsis today. I mean,
நீராயலைந்து கரைய உருக்குகின்ற நெடுமாலே ஸ்ரீரார்ச்சன கவரி வீசும் செழுநீர் திருக்குடந்தை
From time immemorial, the pursuit of divine found reflection in all creative endeavors. Ramanujan's mother was proficient in reciting verses from the Divya Prabandha. Little Ramanujan grew up immersed in the traditional milieu surrounding him. Folk games and mathematical puzzles reflect the culture of those bygone days. He was a gifted one, marked by the civilizational ethos of that time. His forays into the labyrinths of numbers were a way to experience beauty, the grace of divinity.
yeah, this is a new town high school which was formed in 1881. And Ramanujam joined here in 1898 in what was called as a first form, which is 6th standard in those days. The school discovered Ramanujam's intelligence, and Ramanujam discovered his mathematics in the school.
Look at the layers of history in this place.
You know, this place reminds me so much of my childhood.
Is that right? Your
Yeah.
school was like this?
Almost. I mean, I think there's some similarity amongst all these government high schools. The classrooms, the benches, the desks. On the board, you know, maybe there'll be a class monitor who's written attendance, how many were present.
Yeah. Well, this is where it all started for Ramanujan.
This is where it all started. Oh, look at these little fellows. Future Ramanujans, huh?
So are there any famous stories about Ramanujan as a young mathematician?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, one of the stories where he was discovered was, you know, the 0 by 0 story?
The zero? No.
Yeah, so his teacher was asking, well, he posed this problem to the classroom. If 1,000 bananas are distributed amongst 1,000 students, then each would get 1 banana. And then little fellow Ramanujan put his hand up and said, sir, if no bananas are distributed amongst no students, would everyone get 1?
Oh, amazing. So I guess maybe we already see at a young age he understood the importance of understanding variables and maybe producing something from seemingly nothing.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
early glimmers of his genius were already visible here.
Ah, yes, I agree. Take a picture. Okay.
Ramanujan was a student here in Kumbakonam in this government college. He should have been studying all these other subjects, but he didn't.
Right.
What did he do? He sat down and he just focused on mathematics, and he worked through car synopsis.
Ah, the crazy book with over 6,000 theorems and formulas.
Yeah, you know what? I've heard somewhere there's not 6,000. So the numbering is not linear. It goes, at every chapter there's a jump in numbering. It's some 4,800, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But that was his mathematical training.
Wow. But surely, car synopsis was written in such a unique way that Ramanujan presumably emulated the format, right, when he recorded his findings in his own personal notebooks.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite?
My favorite, well, you know, there must have been a whole lot of series. Yes, he rediscovered Euler. The special values of the Riemann zeta function, and he rediscovered Leibniz or Madhva, 1 minus 1/3 plus 1/5 ... is pi by 4.
Yes.
He must have done all of that when he was a student here.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's absolutely amazing.
Well, here's the beautiful river.
It really feels nostalgic to be here after 25 long years. The enigma of Srinivas Ramanujan, and now the genius of Srinivas Ramanujan.
In the very formative years, he traversed the mathematical canvas peopled with distinguished luminaries. His total absorption with numbers took him away from the prescribed curriculum and rendered him unfit for college education. Ramanujan blossomed outside the university system. He was already in his own realm, discovering theorems that paved way to recognition.
The work that he did after he returned to India is, although much more mature and more difficult, pertains to his earlier work and not so much to his work in England. I think that Ramanujan was creating a lot of new mathematics, and this creation of mathematics really lifted his spirit rather than cast him down. And he knew his collaborations with Hardy would be long remembered. These were, absolutely great papers. But after he returned, then he went back to Q series, and there's just an enormous number of beautiful results on Q series in the Lost Notebook.